Next we can discuss on the side fillet weld and end fillet weld. So it will be clear with the help of this figure. So consider a plate which is welded over another plate. So here you can find a load is acting in this direction for this particular plate. So like from the direction of load we can classify the fillet into the end fillet, the side fillet and also the diagonal fillet. So here the welding is done at this point. So here you can see a welding is done, so which is actually parallel to the direction of load. So this particular type of fillet weld is, you can take as it as side fillet weld. So this is side fillet weld. So this is the side fillet weld, and here you can see the end fillet weld. So at this point the weld is actually called as end fillet weld, end fillet weld, and here this weld is considered as the diagonal fillet weld. So the three types of fillet weld are marked here based on the direction of load. So the one is side fillet weld, then the second one is the end fillet weld, and the third one is the diagonal fillet weld. So what is actually the side fillet weld means? Here the welding is provided along the direction of load. So here from the figure itself it is very clear the side fillet weld is provided along the direction of load. So you can add on here, it is provided along the direction of load, So the side fillet weld is provided along the direction of load. So when the welding is done along the direction of load, so that particular type of fillet weld is considered as the side fillet weld, and it will capture the because previously we had seen the fillet weld is actually provided to capture the shear stresses developing on that particular structural element. So here the side fillet weld is actually provided in the direction of load, and as a result of which it will capture the longitudinal stresses developed in this point. Okay, so you can write here, it will develop or it will capture this side fillet weld will capture longitudinal shear stress. This is very important. So this can be asked for the competitive examination, that is the side fillet weld will capture the longitudinal shear stress developed at the connection point. So because it is directed along the direction of load, and as a result of which it will capture the longitudinal shear stress. Then coming to the end fillet weld. Okay, so the end fillet weld is actually provided perpendicular to the direction of load, because here the load is acting in this direction, and then on comparing the direction of load and the orientation of this fillet weld, it is at 90 degree. So you can write here, it is provided perpendicular to the direction of load, and that will capture the transverse shear stress. So that will capture the transverse shear stress. So this is very important on considering the end fillet weld and side fillet weld. So the question will be like this: which of the fillet weld that captures the longitudinal shear stress? So the answer is side fillet weld. And which of the weld will capture the transverse shear stress? So the answer is end fillet weld, because that is provided in the perpendicular direction, so that will capture the transverse shear stress. So these 2 points are important towards the side fillet and end fillet weld. And here also see in the diagonal way, so that term should be also known. So it is diagonal fillet weld, it will capture both longitudinal and transverse shear stress because it is oriented in the diagonal way. Okay, so it will capture both means both longitudinal as well as transfer shear stress. So that is very important in the case of diagonal fillet weld. Next we can discuss on the minimum size of weld depending upon the thickness of the weld. So in general the minimum size of the weld is taken as 3 mm. So underline that number. So the minimum size of the weld is 3 mm. That is very important. So you can add here the minimum size of weld. Minimum size of weld is equal to 3 mm. This is very important. This was the previous competitive exam question, like it was observed in AE and overseer grade 1. That is, the minimum size of weld is given by. So the answer is 3 mm. Now let us look at the minimum size of weld for depending on the thickness of the plate. So here you can add the 2 columns. One is the minimum size of weld, and on second you can add the thickness of plate. So thickness of plate. So thickness of plate. So here it is actually the discussing on the fillet weld actually. So like this is also for fillet weld. So the minimum size of the weld is given by 3 mm. Now like let us look what are the size of weld or the minimum size of weld depending upon the thickness of the plate. So the minimum size of the weld is taken as 3 mm again for plate up to the thickness of the plate up to 10 millimeter. This is the first point. For the thickness of the plate up to 10 millimeter, the minimum size of fillet weld is taken as 3 mm. Then it will be taken as 5 mm when the thickness of the plate ranges between 10 to 20 mm. That is the next point. The thickness of the plate ranges between 10 to 20 mm, and the size of the weld or the minimum size of the weld will be adopted as 5 mm. Then the third point is the size of the weld is taken as 6 mm when the thickness ranges between 20 to 32 mm. And the last point is the size of the weld is taken as so the last point is the size of the weld is taken as 8 mm when the thickness of the plate ranges between 32 to 40 mm. So this is very important towards the minimum size of the weld depends on the thickness of the weld. So you can mark this table as important.